Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. We're going to kind of get into a little bit of some new stuff with a little bit of review, but kind of pushing us into the discussion more into leading into the Civil War. So we know that we've been talking about westward expansion. We know that that relates to our discussion on manifest destiny. When we talk about manifest destiny, again, we're talking about this idea that the United States was supposed to be all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It was meant to happen. And we know these ideas we talked about before when we were still at school. We talked about obviously pushing all the way west, taking over land that doesn't belong to us yet. The fact that Native Americans are going to be affected by this. And also we're going to be discussing how this leads to conflict with Mexico specifically. Okay. And we've seen this image already, how it relates to the idea of everything that the United States has, involvement with is bettered because of that. More expansion, more territory, more technology, and this the female figure represents progress, and where she's headed is west to the area that is, more unknown, more rugged, more wilderness. And you can see here how the natives are kind of grouped with the herd of bison, and we have the Pacific Ocean here. So these are things we've already talked about. But as we are moving forward, it is important to know that we're getting into situations where westward expansion is causing us to have some issues with other countries. And one has to do with Texas. Now, Texas, we know today, is a big state in the United States, but originally this is Mexican territory. And Mexico wanted Americans to move into Texas to settle because no one was there but natives. And natives were causing a lot of problems for the Mexican government. And so what happened is Americans were encouraged to come to Texas for the cheap land, and they could bring their slaves. And so that was a win-win for Americans because Texas is a great place, especially the eastern part, very fertile, good for growing crops like cotton, which you found out was a big key crop for the South. Okay, so the good thing about that for the Americans is that it was cheap land. They could bring their slaves. They were making money, but so many people came in that this became to cause an issue where the Mexican government was worried that Americans were coming in and not following the rules. And so they began to enforce specific rules. And there was a few that they enforced, like they had to convert to Catholicism. You had to be Catholic. Well, Americans are used to having freedom of religion, so this became a problem, and they just didn't like being told what to do for that. Mexico tried to outlaw slavery. Well, kind of hard to do that if you're telling farmers that are coming in here that they can have slaves, and that didn't go very well. And finally, Americans are asked to pay higher taxes. And if you're being asked to pay higher taxes, that's not going to go over well. So what does this end up meaning? Well, it means that Americans feel they have no rights, no representation. What will they do next? And we need to think about this. Where have we heard about this before? Where we've seen this? Well, we talk about revolution. So just like the way the American colonists were dealing with Britain during the colonial period, Americans in Texas will declare independence from the Mexican government because they don't think the government listens to them. They don't think the government represents them. Okay, and so this is going to lead to conflict, as you can see in the picture here. We have regular Americans. These are not trained soldiers fighting against the Mexican army. These are farmers, wilderness explorers. Nothing crazy in terms of their military experience. And this includes the battle at the Alamo, which is this building down here. It was an old Spanish religious building called the Missionary. It's still standing today, and it became a very big rallying cry for Americans against Mexico because they felt that they would be better off as their own government, very similar to the way the colonists were under British rule. Okay, and so we lose the battle at the Alamo. Most of the men die at the battle. The women and the children are spared. But we regroup to formally declare our independence and call ourselves the Republic of Texas. Now, this is a separate government, has nothing to do with Mexico, and at least for a few years has nothing to do with the United States. Okay, and so this is the Republic of Texas right here. And it is going to have disputed territory between Mexico and Texas, which means the Republic thinks it's much bigger, and Mexico thinks that Texas is just this little area. We're going to have to pay attention to that soon. Now, Oregon, where does this play in? Now, the Oregon Trail picture I brought in here is going to flash. I apologize for that. But if you haven't played the game, you should check it out. You can find it online. You can find a simulation of it. Oregon, right here, far northwestern part. Not a lot of people there originally, but it brings settlers there because there is opportunities. Now, the opportunities are going to be available because Britain and the United States both claim it. U.S. and Britain agreed to claim the territory. Now, Britain's not going to have a lot of people living there, but the United States is going to have people go there because it's for fur trading. But then what people realize is it's very fertile. It's good for farming. And so they send word back to people out east and say, hey, you should come out to Oregon because Oregon has all this great land available for you to farm. Okay. And so what happens is, just like if you played the Oregon Trail game, people risk their lives. They go by covered wagon. They experience conditions of survival. Many die along the way of cholera or dysentery. And they struggle to survive this long journey because you're talking about people going tremendously long distances. Okay. What ends up happening is there's so many Americans that end up in the Oregon Territory that they encourage the government to take over control so that they can be under the American government. They want rights, they want freedom, they want representation, and the United States is going to negotiate with Britain. There's no war or anything like that. And James Polk, who's the guy who loves this idea of manifest destiny, negotiates the deal for the United States to acquire Oregon. Okay, and so this ends up becoming Oregon Territory, and you can see here in the blue, it's free territory. That means that slavery is not going to be allowed in any of these areas right now where it's this blue. The red area is slave states, and the blue here is the free states. Okay, and notice we have the even number here. That's important moving forward. Now let's talk about the conflict. Okay, we were going to get into war with Mexico, and here's the reason why. We want land that Mexico has. It's that simple. Okay, we want land that Mexico has, and Mexico won't sell it to us. And so we can't fulfill manifest destiny. Manifest destiny cannot happen without that land. And so what happens is we go to war. We basically send our troops into an area that we feel is ours. Mexico feels is theirs, and the troops kind of face off each other. Not as dramatic as this picture, but they face off against each other, and there's some American lives lost. And what happens is word gets back to President James Polk that American lives have been blood has been shed on American soil. And what that does is that encourages him to declare war because he wants the territory. And so he tries to get Congress to formally declare war on Mexico, and they do. And it's not a war that everybody's a fan of, but it's popular because a lot of people in the country love this idea of manifest destiny. Guys, everything that we're talking about with westward expansion is tied to this idea of manifest destiny. Okay, and so we go into a 2-year conflict, 1846 to 1848. We're the more superior or powerful military in this battle, and we basically overwhelm the Mexican government and the Mexican army into basically saying, yeah, you got to give up the territory to us and sell it to us. And so we purchased the desired land, the last big piece of the puzzle, to fulfill manifest destiny from Mexico. Okay? And in order to see that, we'll give you a visual here for a moment of what that looks like, but it's a significant piece of the puzzle. Now, where does California play in this, in the gold rush? These are 49ers who are panning for gold along the rivers here in California. Where does this play a role in all this? Well, gold's discovered. Gold is that word that everybody wants to hear, and like, I can make money, I can make it rich. Okay, and so in early 1848, right around the time that Mexico and the United States negotiate the treaty to give the land that the United States wants to the United States, they find gold in California. And so word's going to get around. It's worldwide. People in Europe, people in South America, people in Asia are all going to go to California because they want to find gold and make money and make it rich. And they're willing to risk their lives to do that. That's what you have to understand, guys. People would risk everything for the opportunity to maybe find gold. There was no guarantee of it, okay? And thousands of Americans in the East took all their resources, all the wealth they had, and they put it all into getting west to California to try to strike it rich. Okay, most people never found enough money to be like a wealthy situation, but it brought so many people to California. It did lead to conflict with Native Americans who were looking for land. Who, natives died of disease, but it's one of those things where the California population gets so big that they're going to become a state very quickly. It's the quickest path to statehood. Okay, and this is something we're going to have to look at in a little bit down the road because they want to be a free state. And we know, looking at our map, that, well, this is the question I'm going to ask you. What does this map tell you? What do you see here? Okay, we have free states, we have slave states, we have free territory, we have slave or free state here. We have unorganized territory. It's all over the place. I mean, look at the key, guys. Take a look at the key and think about what this represents. Okay, so that's just a general overview for you to think about how fulfilling manifest destiny, which is what this is, what impact that makes on our country as a whole and other issues moving forward. And one thing we're gonna have to watch for is slavery, because this right here, guys, is 1850, 11 years before the Civil War starts, okay? So I hope this helps. We're gonna do more of these. I will talk to you soon. I hope you guys are doing great. Take care.